In this video, we'll cover everything you need to ensure your integration runs reliably and efficiently, from token management and debugging to performance tips and future-proofing strategies. There may be times when you need to reference a Jobber client account ID in a workflow. So where do we get that account ID? So let's go over to the Jobber Development Center and open GraphiQL. Create a new tab, and let's write a new query. We'll label this get account. We're going to request the account object. And in the account object, we want the name field and the ID field. Let's run that. There we go. So let's copy the correct ID based on the name and paste it into our custom value field. Under Jobber account ID, we'll save that. You can see there's some other custom values in here that we haven't discussed previously. Jobber access token and Jobber refresh token. If GHL's built-in token management fails, you can create a Jobber access token manually using the OAuth 2 authentication flow. So why don't we go through that? To start, go to the Jobber documentation and open up the authorization code flow section inside the app authorization page. You can copy the sample authorization URL and replace the client ID with your app's client ID and the redirect URI with your callback URL that you use to create the app. You can ignore the state parameter. Paste the modified URL into a new tab and load the page. So I've got my tab here. I've already built my URL. Let's paste that in here. Now, if you are not logged into Jobber, you'll be prompted to log in and grant access to your app. Once access is granted, you'll be directed back to the callback URL, and the authorization code will be in the URL after code equals. And you can see that here. So let's copy that code. Now let's go to a new workflow that we haven't discussed yet inside the Jobber integration folder. We've got two workflows here, and let's go to the refresh token workflow. Open up that webhook action, and we're going to take our code and paste it into the query parameters for code. Now we're going to test this. And any contact will do. All right, we got success. And you can see that Jobber returned an access token and a refresh token. We're going to copy our refresh token and paste that into our custom value. Now we're going to go to our access token workflow. All right, we're going to open up the get access token action. This uses your refresh token, client ID, and client secret to request a new access token. So you can see we already have all our custom values in here. I won't worry about running this right now, but we already have a sample request down here. If you see a warning for refresh token rotation is off, note that this is a setting in your Jobber app and is required for publishing to the app marketplace. This workflow is designed to run in a loop. After generating a token, it saves the token to the custom value and then waits 59 minutes and uses a go-to step to loop back and refresh again. I should pause at this point and mention a concept known as loop locking. Loop locking is a safety feature built into HighLevel to prevent infinite loops. That's essentially what you're trying to create here is an infinite loop. The HighLevel system will trigger loop locking under various conditions, but based on my own personal testing, loop locking will occur in this type of situation if the workflow runs in a loop more than 9 times in 30 minutes. once per hour is generally safe, although I do recommend monitoring this and having workflow error notifications enabled to catch any potential loop locks. To run it, test the workflow with any contact and monitor the execution logs. You'll see the access token is saved to your custom value. Now that you have the token, you can go to any of your workflow steps that makes Jobber API calls. For example, in our quote status workflow, we can go to get quote details, change the authorization type from OAuth2 to bearer token. And I already have a bearer token created here, but I'll show you how to create a new one. We can go into our variable picker, go to custom variables, integrations, Jobber access token, and I'm just going to label this Jobber2. Repeat this step for each workflow action that needs authorization. All right, so not all workflow actions in HighLevel are free. Premium actions include inbound webhooks, custom webhooks, array actions, and GPT steps. At the time of this recording, premium actions cost around 1 cent each. While that's low, it does add up quickly at scale. So here are some ways that you can reduce costs. End workflows early. Use conditionals to stop execution if critical data is missing. Like, for example, our conditional check here, here, and here. Avoid duplication. Reuse data that's already stored in custom fields or tags. Combine GraphiQL operations. For example, in the create client workflow, we use one mutation to create both a client and their property. This avoids 2 separate calls. If we look at GraphiQL, you can see that pretty easily right here. It's not necessary to use 2 calls, one to create the client and a separate one to create their property. Another thing to consider, and this is just as much a cost issue as it is a functionality issue, is the concept of infinite sync loops. Be sure you don't use identical triggers for workflows, both in HighLevel and in Jobber. For example, using a contact created trigger inside of HighLevel to send and create a client in Jobber, and then have a client created webhook enabled in Jobber that then comes back and recreates that client in HighLevel. You can also upgrade to Workflow Pro right here. It gives you 10,000 premium actions per month for $15. This can reduce your cost per action by over 80%. Now, invariably, you'll encounter bugs or failed requests. There are some tools that you can use to debug that. One, of course, is GraphiQL. You can use webhook.site to view raw webhook payloads. You can use Postman to run and troubleshoot API requests outside of GHL. You can also use a tool called JSON Lint to make sure that your JSON is properly formed. Also, I would recommend enabling the notifications inside of global workflow settings so that admins can receive an error message if a workflow has an issue. Also, it's helpful to familiarize yourself with HTTP status codes and how to interpret them. For example, a 200 code equals success. A 400 code equals a malformed request. A 401 response means that there's an authorization issue, most likely with an expired token. An empty response could possibly be a bad URL. Now, you can even use a valid token from GraphiQL to test an action in GHL, and you can do this to isolate whether the failure is due to authentication or to something else. Now, in the future, the Jobber integration app will make setup easier, but it won't eliminate the need to understand how to build an integration. You'll still need to understand system architecture, how to debug failures, and how to create scalable, idempotent workflows. The knowledge that you're learning now lays the foundation for integrating with any API-based platform in the future. So in this video, we covered how to store and use your Jobber account ID, how to manually generate and manage tokens, how to reduce cost with efficient workflows, and some debugging tools and best practices. In the next lesson, we'll walk through a real-world use case with a fictitious landscaping company called Peak Property Pros and see how all this comes together in a practical scenario.